All right, guys. Welcome to September 28th recorded Zoom. It's pretty late today. I ended up staying up just because I wanted to move around my setup. So I just said, instead of trying to force myself to wake up early, I'd rather just get this done right now. So basically, all right, we're going to follow up on what we mentioned the previous Zoom. Right, so as we said, we ignored the wick that was in place, and I believe this was from Friday or the 20, no, this was from Thursday. And so I ignored the wick. So from a perspective of order flow, right, we could, if we were to see a break lower, then we would have anticipated more downside movement, right? However, during, I believe this was Friday. Yes, the 24th. Right, right here, right, we had that major push up, and the thing was, at that current time, although there is a strong push into the upside, it is still justifiable to try to continue lower, because this could potentially be one, two, I'm not going to consider this a touch, but potentially two pushes into that inefficiency fill that we brought up, and because this two touches could signify potential bearish order flow or potential weak bullish order flow, right? So we know that in order to generate that that bearish move, we would need that break, and that is when we can anticipate any type of bearish movement, right? So unfortunately, right, we didn't get that, and it looks like now, right, that the direction has been solidified, especially because we did not meet an invalidation, right? But we did create a new low-high retracement continuation, right? So this is now, to me, showing its hand. This is still a bit unjustifiable unless you're looking at it from a momentum perspective. But from an order flow perspective, after seeing that low-high retracement continuation, right, you can see that we came back into a turbulence point where the volume came in, and that reaction, right, is pretty much what happened yesterday morning, I believe. Yeah, the 27th, yesterday morning, and this is what's currently carrying us to the upside. So just based on how, right, order flow is pushing, based on how internal structure is pushing, right, I think it makes all the sense in the world. Right, it makes all the sense in the world for us to now, after seeing it show its hand, for us to come reach previous highs up here. Right, we know that there was a potential possibility of seeing that reversal, but just looking at this now, especially after we showed its hand, right, my EU sell positions are still justified in terms of holding. As you can see, we also have, I'm going to delete this actually. We also have a structural disruption, right? As of, the movement that we just had pre-London right now, which was about 3 hours ago. And so this move is what's basically carrying us right into that completion of the structural disruption, right? A continuation BOS followed by a newly formed break of structure up here. Excuse me. And that is pretty much, right, giving us, justifying to us that we still have a ton of bullish momentum, right? And until then, until any transition occurs, I cannot justify anything outside of that. And that directly looks, it comes back to EU, which we mentioned last week, right? After where is Friday? So 24th. So this was pretty much market open this week, right? As we said, it made all the sense in the world to have price potentially come back up here, but no bigger than this. And as you can see, that was the perfect top, which then led to the creation of an internal SR, right? Coming back into a turbulence point. As you can see, push up, and that's where the big volume move came down. It don't even make sense to potentially make a trade or look for a trade there. Unfortunately, right, when we zoom in here, I wanted to take a scenario, right? And let me see if I remember exactly where it was. So just looking at this internally, excuse me, right? I see a mitigation move, tiny inefficiency. This tiny inefficiency leads into preliminary structure break, right? So I actually took a position inside of the follow-up POI, right? The follow-up POI then met the initial target, right? The preliminary structure break, which is where I like to take my break evens. But unfortunately, this came whack once more into the POI, and there, this is now a bullish conversion, right? Internal structure break. So we can now technically justify a bullish scenario, which is why you see a reaction come out of there. So because this, right, creates a new new preliminary break of structure. This is now a solidified low, right? So we potentially could be looking at taking liquidity. But right, as sessions continue, I didn't trade London last night, so I'm not looking at this L. Excuse me. Right, so we have a potential bullish mitigation, but the bullish mitigation has now been unable to lead us into a break of structure. So this inevitably leads us into a disruption based on the POI that launched price back up. And that is pretty much justifying me holding my positions back from up here, because I know that because of the reaction that we obtained, right, based on the previous structure point here, I know that this can now be a justification, right, to continue holding, because I don't have a bullish disruption or a bearish disruption of order flow, because the POI keeps getting met once, twice. Although at this point I don't even see that that's because of the POI. I would say that's more so because of here. And if we zoom in, right, this would now be the new reference POI here. And as you can see, because that was reacted, then came back for the 50% potentially. This, because we did not break the POI, there is no disruption of bearish order flow. Therefore, we can only continue lower. And as you can see, our initial target is met, or was met, right, which is this previous low, which, as you can see, is already a 1 to 25, which is 63 pips. Excellent trade. And I don't see this stopping soon. I see this potentially, probably by the time I wake up, I do see this target being met. And I don't see this stopping anytime soon, especially if we continue to break lower. Because now if we break lower and we even break a previous low here, that's now a type of disruption based on the wick and that I believe it was a 2-day, 3-day POI that we mentioned a couple weeks ago. Yeah, it was the 2-day wick. It didn't reach the 50%. Oh, but yeah, anyways, if we do fully break through, right, this said previous low, right, then it solidifies this move up here that happened a while back as a confirmed liquidity grab on our swing time frame. So that pretty much just gives you all the justification in the world to make this continue lower. But I do see this definitely taking out the POI. I'm sorry, the daily previous low, which is only 13 pips away. Mainly because of how strong was yesterday's closure in terms of a bearish movement. Not to mention bearish order flow is still intact. You know, the confirmations just go on and on. Moving on to GU. Right, so this one was an interesting one. As we said, we could have started to transition into a bullish momentum, I believe. But just looking at this, right, from a structure perspective, right, we have the, I believe this is where we discussed that, I believe it was Nico that took this trade here, right? You can see super sloppy, but we gave a bullish rally, creating a bullish disruption, a bearish order flow disruption, meaning bullish movement. But this move could not sustain itself from the previous high. So because we now have here the first preliminary structure break, I have my solidified low. This is now unwillingness inside of internal bullish structure. So right, because of that, as you can see, I believe we have, yep, there's that reaction. So the reaction currently in play is potentially from the inefficiency fill, almost pretty much perfect. But that is currently driving price lower. And because this unwillingness has now even taken out major structure, right, I see this as a potential newly formed SR wherever this decides to bottom out, with the internal range being there, and we should be leading into the previous liquidity that we mentioned. But yeah, not much to be said there, but it is good to see that conversion. It is good to acknowledge unwillingness, how it works, what it does, what it means. And yeah, you guys know how that goes. AU, very interesting one. We had a rally today during Asia session. I don't see from where we reacted from afterwards. Potentially the inefficiency fill right there. Excuse me. But yeah, the issue with AU, right, as we said, it's been the most bullish out of any pair. And because of that, right, I cannot justify it otherwise, especially if we're causing extremely strong reactions here, because we have, you know, obviously there was no entry here. If you guys remember, there was no entry here, and this move generated the internal structure break, which, you know, pretty much made me still be bearish on the pair, right? So although the preliminary range, right, you could even say the inefficiency fill was met, and there you have an internal bearish disruption. Our trend never converted. Because our trend never converted, we cannot pretty much convert the bias. Let me see. Right, so what is this entire move up then? A retracement. Right, so I'm still looking to take these lows as we mentioned before. I don't see why not. But for the most part, you guys see that because of this confirmed reaction plus the preliminary structure break solidifying the high, means that we now have bullish unwillingness in terms of structure, and we now have this internal SR in play, which is the high low retracement, and you know, pretty much just solidifies it even more with the minor intraday leg being broken. But yeah, as you can see, we should be looking back at previous lows, and from there, like we said last call, it'll be interesting to see what happens relatively around kind of like 72-ish, a bit deeper maybe. And if we see any type of movement there, any type excuse me, any type of conversion, then I believe that is fully justifiable, just because of how much effort we're using just to drive price a little bit lower, below relative equal lows. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the week. But yeah, I mean, the biases haven't really changed too much. You guys knew that we were bearish on EU since the previous day, previous Zoom, I'm sorry, and that's pretty much played out perfectly. From the range that we acknowledged, that was pretty much tapped perfectly, and that is now continuing lower. So yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys on Friday.